As we have seen in previous videos, in After Effects, type can be set in any number of ways, according to however we're designing the piece that we are creating. Sometimes we need to use the text to be within a container, meaning it has to cover a specific space, and that's when we create a text space for it. In other instances, we want to use the text as a design element that we can control through a path. And in order to do so, we need to be able to write the text on a path. So in After Effects, to do this, we need to use masks in order to define what the text is going to be laid out, how the text is going to be laid out, sorry. So let me go ahead and choose from my timeline. I'm going to go click on New, and I'm going to set text. So I'm going to create a new text layer, and I'm going to create a series of words, the word path in this case. Let me select that. Control C, Control V, 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 V. So I have basically the same word on a line. And so this is just text on a line, basically the way you would create text by typing, and then you would hit return and a new line will appear. Well, what if I want this to follow a specific path? Well, let's say, for example, I want this to be on a curve or something like that. To do that, I would have to apply a mask to that particular layer and use the mask as the path for my text. So how does that work? Well, let's go ahead, and with the layer selected, I am going to choose the pen tool, and then I'm going to notice that because I have the layer selected, when I'm using that tool, I get the little mask icon next to my cursor. So the mouse is showing me that little rectangle with a dot inside it, which indicates there is a mask that I am about to apply to that layer because the layer is selected. So let me go ahead and click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and click and drag. Now I just created a line that is a path, and you would say, well, that's not a mask. Well, it is not a mask. It is not a closed loop mask, but because it is defined as a path, if I change my tool to the selection tool, you will notice that that automatically became a path that is attached to that particular layer. If I uncollapse the layer, you will notice that it now shows that I have a mask drawn inside it, and that mask is mask 1. Remember that I can change the color of the mask to better fit whatever I'm working with. So if I wanted to make orange, if I wanted to be orange, there it is. It changes to orange. So now you know that that mask is the mask that I just drew. Now, you'll notice that my text remains on the line, but I already have that defined path that I had created, which is actually a mask. Once again, it's not a closed loop mask, so it might not look like a mask that you've seen in the past because it's not a closed loop. But the line itself, the fact that it's a path, it's a mask. So now with that done, what I want to do is I want to go under the text drop-down menu for that. Let me collapse the mask. And under path options, you will notice that I have the option to select whether I want no path defined for the text that I have in that layer, or I can choose from any of the masks that I have defined within that particular layer. Remember, in After Effects, a layer can have more than one mask. So in this case, since I only have one, that's the only thing that appears under that drop-down menu. Activating that notice that all of these other properties become active for you underneath that path. Things such as whether I want to reverse the direction of the path, if I want to have my text to be on the path perpendicular or not perpendicular, if I want to force the alignment of it, which basically brings in the text to match from beginning to end the beginning of the path, meaning that the text, if it's longer than the beginning and longer than the end, it will just shrink itself to fit within the path, as you can see. First alignment, first margin allows me to move the beginning down the path, or the last margin moves it upstream on the path. And as you probably know by now, looking at the left-hand side of each one of those labels, you'll notice that each one of them is keyframeable. So I can animate this through time. So for example, if I want to have the text appear on the screen, let me go ahead and drag all the way to the left. And by the way, I am moving really fast on this because I am pressing the shift key as I drag. Pressing the shift key moves things by 10 points or 10 pixels or turn rotations at a time, depending on what property you're working with. Let me set a keyframe for this right here. Go to the 5-second mark, which is the end point of my composition. Actually, let's make it in 2 seconds. And move it across the screen so you guys can see that my text will be animated through that particular path. Now that's illegible, of course, so let's give it a little bit more time. I'm going to move my time, that keyframe downstream, and that's a little bit better. That's still quite fast for text to be read on screen. So the point being is that you can actually control the position of the text on the path. So this is how you create text on a path in After Effects. So you need to define the path itself via an actual path or a mask in this case. And by the way, you can copy a path from, let's say, Illustrator and paste it onto the particular layer as a mask, and then it will recognize it as a path once you apply it under the path options inside the text drop-down menu. Now that is pretty cool, and it's extremely useful because, as you can see, you can animate text really quick. Where this comes in handy is when you start mixing it with animators. So you have the ability to combine all these things. They don't have to be one-off instances. You can actually combine this with all kinds of animators. So if I were to go ahead and apply an animator to this and say, for example, scale it up or down as it goes, it would automatically allow me to combine those two things by keyframing them. So say, for example, I want to create a cool animation based on characters. So besides having them on a path like this, what else can I do? Well, let me go ahead and remove this layer. I'm going to delete it. And I am going to use my character map in my machine to select some special characters from within the Arial typeface that I'm working with. So I'm going to go ahead and with that character map, by the way, you access character map, but it's an app within your computer. So if you click on start and then from the search tool, search character map, it will become available to you. So let's go ahead and open up that character map. And what I want to do is I want to use some of these characters. So let's start with some triangles, for example. So I'm going to select that triangle. I'm going to let me actually select several of them. I'm going to place that one here. So there it is. And I already have a heart and a rectangle in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you how I did that. So let's say, for example, I choose this one, double click that one, and then I want to choose, say, this one. So I'm going to select those three characters for now. I'm going to copy them, and then I'm going to go to my After Effects window. And by the way, the reason why I'm doing that with the character map is because After Effects, as of this video, it doesn't have a glyph tool inside it. So I don't have access to seeing glyphs, which is what these things are called within the program, unless you actually know the ASCII code for those characters, which I don't know if some of you might. I don't. But if you do, then you would just enter the ASCII code and it will give you the character. If you don't know the ASCII code, then you would have to access this through the character map. If you're working on a Mac, you would have to access this via Command Shift T on the keyboard. Command Shift and T on the keyboard will open up the character map for you on the Mac. So with that done, let's go ahead and right click here and create a new text layer. And then I'm going to paste Control V. And you'll notice that it pasted the characters that I had just copied from the character map. I'm going to hit return after each one of these so that they become their own lines. And then I'm going to switch colors. I'm going to change colors so that they become a little bit more visually interesting. And let's keep that one green. Let's make this one orange or something like that. So orange would do. Yeah, that's good. All right. So I am going to make about, let's say, 16 instances of this, or let's say 15. So that's one. Control C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. This one, same thing. C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now, the reason why I'm doing this with these characters is so that you can see that because this is not a monospaced type font, it's not a monospaced typeset. It's not a monospaced font. We have different spacing between different characters. Even though these are all 72 point, they appear to be completely separate, different in the way they appear in their horizontal spacing. Only monospace types are the ones that actually, typesets are the ones that actually showcase as evenly spaced. So for something like this, I need to go in and start manipulating my tracking. So I'm going to go ahead and increase the tracking once again, just like when I was moving the text a few minutes ago. I'm going to press the shift key as I click and drag on that button to increase the speed at which it expands. And I'm going to try to match the position of each character to the triangles above it. And I don't have to be exact on this, by the way. And I'm using the actual tracking again for the diamond shapes below it. So now they almost look like they're aligned, even though they're not really, because their tracking is completely different. So now, what do I want to do with this? Well, in this case, what I want to do is I want to create a circle mask in the center of the screen. So how do I go about doing that? Well, let's go ahead and utilize the tools that I have with this, with the composition window. So I'm going to choose the action title safe area. And then I'm going to go ahead and select my ellipse tool with the layer selected. I'm going to select the ellipse tool from the tools up here. And then I'm going to go to the center of the screen and I'm going to click and drag. And as I'm dragging a non-circular ellipse. If I want it to be circular, I'll press, as I am dragging, I'm going to press shift to constrain proportions. And you'll notice that I'm going to whatever quadrant I am pulling toward. So if I want to click and drag from the center out, I am now clicking and pressing shift. That's what I'm doing right now. Then I'm going to press the Alt key on the keyboard. Sorry, the Control key on the keyboard. Sorry, Control. So on the Mac, it would be the Command Shift and click and drag, so that you actually have the ability to drag from the center out. On the PC, Control, Shift, and click and drag. On the Mac, Command, Shift, and click and drag. So now that I have this set up this way, I'm going to create a mask that's about that size, size, and that's fine. That's good. Now, this is a path, just like the other path was when we were moving the text across the screen. You'll notice that it created a new mask and it puts it in there. Now, let me close that because I don't need it for now. What I want to do, though, is I want to go under the text and I want to activate my path options by selecting that mask, and watch what happens. My text appears below the mask. Now, what do I do to make my text fit the entirety of my mask? Well, let's go ahead and see what things happen when I click, for example, on reverse path. If I click on that, all of my text is inside the mask. If I want it out, I reverse it. If I want this to be, force alignment is the one that I actually want to use. Watch this. When I click on force alignment, my character tracking changes per line to fit the space that I have defined by that mask. Now, you notice that these two are very close to one another. I fixed that by using the force alignment options. So I'm not sorry, first margin and last margin options. So if I go under first margin, if I increase it, I can move this in this direction. If I move the other one down, I can change it as well in the other direction. So I can go ahead and play around until I find the happy medium for where this looks visually even, which is around there. So I'll say it's about 40 degrees and negative 40 for the last margin. Now, how did I arrive to that? It has to do with the fact that I use 15 for each one of these. So the calculation would be done based on the amount of degrees that your original, the amount of characters that you had in each line. But in reality, honestly, in most instances, you get faster to it by actually dragging these values until you find the visual medium of what you're looking at. And I usually look at the alignment of the bottom character here to know that I am center and that the spacing here will be equal to the other ones around it. So now this is cool. Now we see that this has been set up and we see that the characters are all aligned based on, or placed based on, the shape of that path or of that mask that we had created. But where this becomes really interesting is when like I said before, when I start adding animators. So if I go ahead and say, for example, I want to add a scale animator. So when I do that, notice that I can scale the values of each character independently if that's what I want, or I can scale down each character independently if I want to go ahead and change under the advanced option for the animator. I can go ahead and change this to affect each line if I want to. So instead of characters, I can do lines. And when I change the value of scaling, let me scroll this up a little bit. So I can go ahead and change the scaling value and each line will change independently. And I can modify that by, like we did before, by adding a beginning and an end to the range selector. So if I go ahead and say I want this value to be scaling down to 0, I can go ahead and change that animation per line by using my start range selector, as you can see. I can do it on a per character basis. So if I go ahead, let me make this the scale 0 so that we see the difference. I can go ahead and say characters, and when I change the starting point, it actually makes each one of those appear one at a time, sequentially. Or I can change them with my endpoint if I want to. All of this being keyframeable. I can also rotate, so I can go ahead and with the same range selector, I can add an extra animator to the an extra property to the animator. So from that animator add property drop down or fly out, I can go ahead and add rotation. And so I can go ahead and say I want this to be rotating once, let's say. And I can go ahead and change that value by how the range selector is bringing them in. So let me go all the way back to the beginning, and as you can see, each one of them rotates and scales at the same time. I can go ahead and change the position as well. So I can go ahead and say, or I can add an extra animator to this, separate from the original animator for position only. So let's say position, and say, for example, I want to change the position value of the y-axis to this. I can scale, move them in like this, for example. So let's get that here for position at that value, bring it in all the way to the center so that it looks like a little mandala flower. And I can go ahead and make them scale up, or I mean, increase the position up like so. And then perhaps bring it back down again, use the same value. So basically I have this little animation. Now let's go back to animator 1 again for the range selector. And I want to make this, say for example, appear as it goes. So click start here, and I'm going to go to the 2-second mark and make it 100%. So it's going to be appearing as it goes. It comes back into creating this mandala thing. And maybe I want to change those rotation values as well over time. So as you notice, maybe I want to change that. Instead of having it be one rotation, I can have several rotations, or I can fade it in. And so you can create very interesting animations fairly quick just by using characters only that can produce through path positioning, through path placement, really cool effects that can be used as background, or that can be used as a filler for something, or in this case, if you're trying to create a Mandela effect to sort of like create hypnosis backgrounds or something like that, this would be something that is extremely useful. The point here is that the typesetting is based on the masks. So when you apply a mask to the layer, that mask becomes a path that you can type onto or that you can animate through. And by the way, if you go ahead and double click on the mask and you resize the mask, the actual characters will respond accordingly. So you can actually combine the sizing of the mask to create yet more animation levels within this text typeset animations that you're creating for your compositions.